Yeah, it's an exciting moment because it's yeah, I mean clearly we've um, laid our hands bare on that front. I think there's opportunities that are going to come up. It's going to be a huge start to the summer. I think the fact India are coming out, they're going to send out an A team as well, so there'll be a couple of really strong A games to start the year. Been clear with a number of players that there's going to be great opportunities come the start of next year.
So from I guess when you spoke around the recent test squad announcements a couple of months ago, have your thoughts shifted on sort of pecking order of spare batters sort of thing? I mean, you took Matt to New Zealand. Have your thoughts shifted? Is it pretty much a blank page now?
Yeah, I think it's open for anyone to jump up and grab the opportunity. We're really clear with Matt that it was and not only Matt, the guys that missed out as well. That was a really close decision to take him to on that New Zealand tour. It was consistent with what we'd done across the summer. But yeah, I guess a blank page is a good way of describing it. I know Marcus Harris is one who's come off contract, but he's firmly in that mix as well. Cam Bancroft, I think Nathan McSweeney's had a wonderful season as well.
Thanks, George.
Nick Savage.
Thanks, Cole. G'day, George. Xavier Bartlett's obviously one of the exciting additions to this list. Is he someone who you could see potentially featuring in all three formats for Australia over the coming 12 months should the opportunity arise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had Xavier on the radar for some time. He's played some Australia A stuff previously, performed really well in New Zealand with the Dukes ball in the Australia A games we played there a little while ago. I think the challenge for him has just been getting some continuity on the park and getting some cricket in. So a really great year for him on that front, and to be able to get some international cricket in was fantastic. But certainly like the skill set across all three formats. I think ongoing it'd just be that challenge of prioritising what is available for and when, and keeping his body trending in the right direction. But hopefully another huge 12 months ahead for him.
And just on Jai Richardson as well, if I could quickly ask about, he's obviously been pretty susceptible to injury over the past 24 months. It's been pretty frustrating for him. Was that taken into consideration when deciding to offer him a contract for the next 12 months as well?
Yeah, it was. I mean, some of those injuries have been incredibly unfortunate. And some, I think there's a few things that we can continue to work with Jai and work with Western Australia as well on how we try and map out Jai's next 12 months and hopefully see him on the park for longer. But there's a high skill set there. He doesn't need a great deal of cricket to be able to get his skills back on track. So really for him, it is about management of the body and getting himself over the next sort of 6 or 8 months until the start of that season, getting him into a really good shape. Excited that he's over in India. Hopefully he gets a couple of opportunities in the IPL coming up. He's another one who's in the mix for that T20 World Cup as well. So yeah, again, all three formats, every time he is up and going, he's someone we're really excited about.
Thanks, George. Cheers.
Scotty.
G'day, George. Just following on from Andrew's question before, and I'm about the opening stuff or the backup batter stuff, and I'm very aware your next test match isn't for 10 months away, so this is a long way off. But how stable do you sort of view the top of the test order at the moment in terms of Steve and Aussie as your openers and whatnot? Or do you sort of feel like there potentially may be decisions to be made in this contract period on that, given I guess Aussie's age and Steve sort of still reasonably fresh to that opening position?
Oh, there may be. I mean, I think anytime you're sort of putting together this list, you're thinking ahead. I think I'll echo Andrew's comments at the end of New Zealand. I don't think there's a big enough sample size to be running a line through Stephen at the top of the order. I've seen some stuff there that we really like. And I think the whole purpose of that was also working about how we could work that top 6 to function as well as it can. I think there's some improvement to come there, and I think India will be a huge challenge across the summer. But I think in terms of options. And as you said, there's a fair bit of time before we actually have to make a decision on that. I think there's options there.
And just one on the white ball stuff, mate. Obviously, Marcus Stoinis, no contract. Ashton Agar, no contract. I know there's a T20 World Cup in a few months' time, but after that, it's a couple of years until the next big World Cup in ODI or T20 cricket. Is that sort of suggestion that a changing of the guard is coming a bit in white ball cricket over the next few years or next 12 months or so?
Oh, I think one-day cricket and T20 cricket, it always moves more in cycles than Test cricket, just given the nature of the build-up to those sort of major tournaments. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's always a bit of a challenge. This T20 World Cup falls in this contract cycle. Those guys both obviously got contracts this year and are firmly a part of our planning around that T20 World Cup. I think we'll come together sort of the end of April to put a squad together for that. And both those names will, Stoin and Ash Agar will be firmly in the mix for that squad. And then going forward, I think performances and both individually and as a team will dictate how quickly that team necessarily transitions. There's a one-day Champions Cup in Pakistan in Feb. So that, that's another big white ball tournament that we'll be looking to build towards as well.
Thanks, George.
Ben Davis.
Thanks, Cole. Good day, George. Bartlett's been asked and answered, but Michael Nisa from he was just always knocking on the door just behind the quartet. Where does this sort of leave him in the state of play?
Yeah, we're really clear in catching up with Ness recently that it doesn't necessarily change where he sits in that pecking order, but that's just in terms of how the contracts landed. There are a couple of guys across with potentially some multi-format skills that meant that unfortunately he just missed out. But I still think the skill set's there. I think he's had a challenging year on a number of fronts. From a personal point of view from his own playing, but it hasn't changed where he sits. I think the fact he was on that New Zealand tour, our most recent tour, shows that he's still head in really high regard. He's got a really clear plan of what he wants to do across the winter and build into next year. And I guess, that'll be the focus. That obviously lots of chat around the batting opportunities that are come, but it's no different on the bowling front too. I think we've been pretty clear that Scott Boland, Michael Nisa, and probably Lance Morris have been the three that have been ready and waiting, and unfortunately for them, they haven't had an opportunity. Fortunate for us that Pat, Mitchell, and Josh have been so resilient and been able to play as well and as much as they have. But yeah, clearly going forward, there may be more opportunities across that test space, and Ness will firmly remain in the mix for that.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate.
Jack Painter.
Hey, George. Where does someone like Tim David fit into the contracting picture? Was he offered one with such a white ball heavy start for the new contracting period with England and Pakistan series?
No, he wasn't. I mean, again, I think a lot of that T20 direction will probably come out of the performance at this next World Cup and what it sort of looks like post that. I think Tim's really enjoyed his time with the T20 side, and hopefully he feels like that he's a really important member of that team going forward. There's not a great deal of T20 cricket next year in terms of how quickly we need to build towards the next World Cup. Potentially that looks different in the following 12 months. But I think all things being equal, if Tim continues to perform the way he does in that T20 space, he'll continue to be an important member of that team.
Cool. Thanks, George.
We'll go over to Ben. I assume that's you, Benny Horn. You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks.
There we go.
Cole. Thanks, Cole. Yeah, g'day, George. Just following on from the earlier question about the top order, when you say you've got options, do you see that there's a couple of other guys in the existing top six that you think you could switch around to open, or were you more talking about guys who are outside of the 11?
Both. I mean, I think we've shown that depending where Test series are off to Sri Lanka, I think we've shown in the past that that we've got other options in terms of potentially throwing guys up in subcontinent conditions if we think that suits. But I think both. I mean, it was a reasonably unique situation in the fact that we had Cam Green out of the test side and we wanted him back in it. That allowed that made the option of facilitating Steve opening a desirable one. I don't necessarily think we've got a Cam Green waiting outside the 11. We've got some really good players. And a few have been mentioned. I think you throw Aaron Hardy, Josh Inglis as purely as a batsman as well. Bo Webster's year has been absolutely incredible. I think there's a handful of players that, with another 12 months continuing to perform, can all be putting their hands up. And there's a reasonable amount of flexibility around where some of those players can bat as well.
And George, I was just going to ask about Nathan Lyon, just with his time in county cricket being cut back. I was just wondering if there was still any fitness concerns around him, just in the sense that I suppose workload's not something you usually associate with a spinner.
I'm not necessarily. I think with all players, it's that sort of three-way conversation of, the players are looking to fill their contracts and get the opportunities that they want from a cricketing perspective. When we, sat down with Nathan and sort of mapped out what the next 12, 18, 24 months look like, and just what was we thought and eventually what he thought was in his best interests. We're still really excited he gets that opportunity. I think he's in England until around July, so he gets a great opportunity there. I've seen, I think he's excited to be working with Lanks. I know Lanks young spinners are really excited to be working with him. So still a really great outcome. But I think that's just that conversation of actually every now and then lifting the players' eyes and having them have a more longer term look at what's happening and making sure that they're absolutely right to go when those Australian opportunities or the Australian matches are there. But it's not something that we necessarily do. I mean, I saw that it was reported that we'd done the same for Aaron Hardy, but that wasn't the case. That was Aaron working through the opportunities that he's got across that 12 months and coming to that conclusion himself. I still think that opportunity to go and play county cricket, to go and play T20 opportunities around the world when they fit are really important for players and they get a great outcome out of it. And I think we get a more well-rounded and developed player as well.
Sorry, guys, I don't know if I can sneak one more in here, George, but with the World Cup being in the West Indies, I know you, for whatever reason, for various reasons, you didn't have a second spinner for the ODI World Cup last year, but do you see a second spinner in the T20 squad as sort of a non-negotiable for T20 World Cup?
Yeah, probably heading that way. I mean, still working through the last sort of final decisions around that and exactly what we might need. Looking every tournament's different conditions that you might face and teams you might face, clearly a different format. So the balance of the squad, I think, will probably lend itself to having that second spinner there. But again, we've got some guys. I mean, still seems hard for everyone to get their head around the fact that Glenn Maxwell's a pretty handy white ball spinner, and we don't necessarily consider him a part-time option. So he's one that we consider a frontline option in that space. Zamps will clearly be there, and I think there will be opportunities potentially for one more.
Alex.
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, Benny's covered quite a couple of things there. Just following on from the line conversation, George, how have the conversations gone with a couple of other guys? So you've got some multi-format guys who've got quite a lot of cricket over the winter, heading into a big summer series of Test cricket, like Travis Head, who had an interesting year last year in terms of managing his workloads. What are the conversations been like with those guys ahead of the next summer, and also a couple of your Test guys who aren't actually going to play much cricket over the winter, like Alex Carey and Usman Khawaja?
They're individual. Again, one of the opportunities that you get by offering the CA contract is to be able to look across the next 12 or 18 months and have a really clear plan as to what our expectations are and clearly where the international games are, what other opportunities players might be looking to seek, to get different formats of cricket or different opportunities in, and then just marrying those up and seeing if making sure that there's enough gaps and that there's enough time to make sure that they're physically and mentally fresh for what we prioritise, which is clearly the Australian games. We've had a handful of guys who I think have been really successful navigating through that multi-format, being multi-format players over the last couple of years. I think it is always a bit of a learning process as players do develop into multi-format players. Hedy's sort of done that over the last 12 months or so. And so, again, he's one that we'll sit down with and just make sure that he's getting everything he needs to make sure that, regardless of the format or regardless of the series, that when he's playing for Australia, he's ready to go.
Thanks, mate.
Nasha.
Yeah, thanks. George, you mentioned the Sri Lanka series, test series earlier, which is the other tests in this contract cycle and maybe doing things a little bit differently selection-wise. Does Glenn Maxwell remain a live option for that? And would you want to see him play any red ball cricket beforehand? There might be a window next summer for those sorts of guys to play a bit of Shield cricket. Would that be a necessity for someone like Maxi?
Oh, there may be. I think I think there's probably a couple of roles where the direct link between Sheffield Shield or that red ball opportunity and then the conditions or the opportunity and the role that you might have in mind for a specific player may not have that link. I think if the opportunity is there and it fits the player and it fits the state, then that's well and good. And I don't see any harm in it, but it's not a necessity in terms of if we get to the stage where we're picking that Sri Lankan squad and there's a role that we really want, and Glenn fits that bill, I see no problems with the fact that he might not have had much red ball opportunity.
Cheers.
All right.
Thanks, Cole. Hey, George. Firstly, just wanted to know what your IPL viewing schedule has been the last 1 week or so, and with two significant Australian performances last night, Travis Head and then Pat Cummins with the ball and as captain. Did you watch it live, and what do you make of it?
No, not much live watching, mate, but catching a few highlights. And obviously keeping a really close eye on what the Australian players do over there. Really early in the tournament. So good to see everyone getting opportunities, or the guys that are getting opportunities. Good to see that and actually getting out there and playing. And looking forward to seeing how that goes over the coming weeks. But yeah, obviously Dan Vittori's looked after a couple last night. I mean, Heady, I think he got subbed out, so that's the perfect game for him. He gets to bat and then put his feet up, a la Brad Hodge from the one day tournaments a few years ago. A few Diet Cokes after you smack a few. And I need to pick up with Paddy. I thought, his bowling figures last night were outstanding. Looked to me like he might have the skipper's prerogative. He might have given himself a few soft overs there. So he's done pretty well. And I think it's just we'll continue to monitor those opportunities. It's each T20 game is so unique and so different, and the roles are so specific. It's not necessarily about being at the top of the runs or wicket taking list to be performing. There's there's a vast array of things you look at to see if guys are ticking boxes. But I think end of April we'll come together and pick that T20 squad. I think we're pretty close to what we want, but there's no doubt that some strong IPL performances can still sway.
And just on that, a lot of talk about Australia's test top order, but just the top order, especially the opening combination for the T20 World Cup. Delhi are doing something different with David Warner and Mitchell Marsh at the top. So do you look at IPL performances purely from the eye? I know what we want, or we know what we want from our players, the makeup of the squad, or say if Mitchell Marsh has this extraordinary IPL, you could be tempted to say open with him as well.
Oh, we could. I mean, I think we see that with a number of players across a whole range of formats that, different franchises want players for different roles. I'm sure that's happening with bowlers too, and the way that we would look to use them in the Australian team. But I think any time that they get opportunities to play a different role and to do well in it, that can only be good for their development. I think we've clearly used Mitch at number 3 in that T20 side, and I know he enjoys that. I know he's done really well there. But again, I think when you get to those major tournaments, you need a couple of different ways of playing. You need some flexibility in how your team and your squad can structure up as well. So we know that if something happens, that he's got the capability to go to the top.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, Brett. I think we might have to wrap it up. We've got 2 more here. We've got Scotty, and we'll finish off again with Ben.
Thanks, Cole. Hey, George, just circling back to what you're talking about there with the test order, and obviously with the move with Steve was picking the best 6 batsmen, and potentially in a year's time there might be a situation where like Aaron Hardy or Josh Inglis or Bo Webster's knocking the door down. Does that suggest that it's just as likely that, say, when Uzi retires, that a middle order batter comes in and someone else goes up to the top, as you are of picking a specialist opener to replace him, if you know what I mean?
No, that's sort of the point I was trying to make earlier.
Yeah.
I think that was a unique situation. I'm not saying that won't happen, but I think there's probably less chance of that happening.
So it'd be more likely that a specialist opener was to come in.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think I don't want to get locked down to guaranteeing that, but I think any time you're trying to structure up your team, you're looking for the best balance and who you think your best batters are. Given their roles and how the rest of the team's performing and functioning as well. But that's something that I hope I made clear in chatting to the opening batters who missed out. It's we don't not value the position. That was a unique situation, and I would say that it's probably likely that the next opportunity goes to a top order player.
So thanks. Just didn't want to misquote you. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Scotty. Ben, last one.
Yeah, sorry, George. Mine was kind of more trying to clarify as well. But unless you were to go to someone outside the squad, in terms of like the home summer against India in Australian conditions, is the most likely thing that you would just persist with Steve opening?
I think given the performances of the team over a period of time, I think the onus is on those outside to make a really compelling case of why someone should be displaced. And I do think that the guys we've got there, they're in the team for a reason. They're all that top 7. They're all very good players. They've all had great performances at different times across a long period of time. So we continue to back them, continue to expect them to perform. And again, it's hard sort of trying to project forward to something that's 9 or 10 months away. It feels like there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of water can go under the bridge to there. But I don't think our thinking around it will change. It'll be about trying to get the best 6 together and making sure they function well together.
Thanks you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, George. That was an all-encompassing 25 minutes or so. So thanks, everyone, for joining, and we'll catch up with you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.